Welcome to memoQ Talks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Hi, Elena. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Mark?
Awesome. Hey, you just got back from Local World in Dublin. How was that?
It was good. It was fun. As you know, I go to many industry events for various reasons. This one, it was very purpose driven trip. There are several of us who went there. I really wanted to see what is the latest on the market when it comes to localization, particularly AI. That this event was dedicated to all AI developments in the industry and tools. So what I learned is that I think you and I met on the Local World in California, right?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Yes. So 2 years ago, I thought it was 1 year ago. And so at that event,
I missed you at the last one. I went to the last one and you weren't there.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I went to the usual spot where I met you, serendipitously. And I was like, where's Elena?
I was there with you in spirit. So I can't believe it was 2 years ago. Wow, time flies. And so, 2 years ago, we were there, Mark. And I remember all the conversations were AI, wow, crap, what are we going to be doing about it? So everybody was shockingly surprised. Everybody was talking about how it's affecting our industry. Now, 2 years later, we are in Dublin, and I feel that we're still there because now it's more or less balanced. The conversations are, okay, well, we have AI. It's balanced. It's not shock anymore, but we still do not know what we're doing about it.
So,
but that's my personal opinion, and I'm sure there are lots of people that might disagree with that. But we are still sort of like, okay, AI, it's here. What are we doing about it? One of the things that I thought was interesting, again, that is my opinion, that our industry is sort of like, we have so many conversations about AI right now, and all the conversations are within our industry, sort of how we are going to be using it safely, how we are going to be making sure that we are setting it up for the efficiency or productivity or better quality and this and that. And but we are all talking within each other and within our industry, and sort of like back to you back to me. I don't think we are really sort of thinking of how it's all going to be affecting our clients, or we are not really including our clients into conversation. So like our industry is very small and it's closed, and we just keep talking between each other. That's how I feel. We are not including anybody from outside of the industry.
I get that as well. I just recently had a conversation with two of the leading AI LLM experts in our industry. And very quickly, the conversation, because when I think of LLMs and AI, the applications are global and infinite, okay? But they really wanted to bring the conversation back specifically to the local industry and look at the applications in the local industry. And then you really, really narrow it down. But let me ask you, because you brought up your customers. But hold on for a second. I really want to talk to you about what you do and what Astra does. But we're going down this rabbit hole, so let's continue in that direction. When we talk about AI, are you really what customers are looking for is results? So do they care if it's AI driven or not? I mean, or do you even care if a technology is AI driven or not? Don't you really just want the results?
Yeah, and I love that you're bringing it in, because that's the conversation that, well, first of all, in Dublin, we talk a lot about that we are switching right now. We are not providing services anymore. We are not providing product anymore. Now we are providing language experience. Whatever that means, we are providing now language experience. And this is really cool. And I really that's our industry is certainly evolving. I personally think that it's all positive. I think AI is definitely opening to us many new opportunities. We're definitely going to be very soon, in my opinion, seeing different way how we are going to be packaging our services. We are going to be probably looking at new pricing structures and new pricing models. I'm probably going to be seeing more of the subscription models. We're going to be seeing more working with the content and content creation, multilingual content creation. So lots of good stuff is coming up our way. I think linguists are going to be more of experts. Translators probably not going to be so much of a translators any longer. So all this good stuff is coming up. But again, how is all going to be relevant to our client that we are serving, whether those are client customers or end users, because in some way it could be the same, in some ways those are different things, right? So my point is, again, to me, those are some questions that I'm asking myself and my team, that we are talking to each other and making sure that this is what we are addressing within our company. Because what is how we are going to be pivoting, and you guys probably saw that we rebranded, we positioning ourselves slightly different from who we were even before pandemic, after pandemic. Now we are looking forward within the next 7 years. Because, again, we can be talking about scaling up, we could be talking about rebranding, but it's not about us. It's what the community and our client want us to deliver to them, and how we are going to be relevant in that sense.
Well, and that's kind of what I want to talk to you about, because, I came into the industry and I worked for a traditional LSP, which means, or I could say typical, we provided a lot of translation services, and then some value-added services around translation, some interpretation. And, my experience in the industry has been primarily in that context. Even on the technology side with memoQ, we are a translation management system, translation being the key word there, provider. So, a lot of the things that when I look at the local industry, I look through the lens of the translation, the traditional, kind of process of doing that. But, at Astra, you provide a lot of services you do provide translation services and localization services, but you also provide other services. And I'd like to talk to you about that, because it's an area that I don't have, really any deep understanding of. I don't know how the services are delivered. So maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the other non-translation services that you provide, and the different forms that takes. For example, with deaf services, what does that mean, and how do you do it?
Okay, so you would like to talk about deaf services?
To start with, because it's something that, I've never been in an organization that's provided those services.
I love the fact that you said deaf services, because it's very current, the way that you asked that question. Just even several years ago, there are lots of organizations that were using deaf and hard of hearing services, including at Astra. And then it started evolving within the deaf community. So now it is actually indeed deaf services. So thank you for saying that.
I have to be honest, I looked at your website. So
it's very deaf community driven. So okay, in our case, so it all goes back to when we started the company, and we are not one of the companies who just said, okay, we are going to provide ASL, American Sign Language, as a language in addition to all the other spoken languages that we do, and that's just going to be on the menu of our services, and that's how we will just start doing it. In our case, when we originally started at Astra, there was a decision made that you cannot provide the language without being familiar with the culture. So right in the beginning, we had conversation, and there are two people who were involved into starting the company. On my end, I came as an expert in spoken language interpretation, and then we had Heather Buckley. She was a graduate from the Gallaudet University. She introduced me to the deaf community, and so we started working towards structuring the organization. And she was an expert in ASL, and not only a lot of knowledge she brought about deaf culture, and then we started hiring deaf people from the deaf community that were working in our leadership right from the very day one. And that's how we position ourselves differently, because we do have people that are working on in our operations and on the marketing side. You probably saw it on our social media, and even in our accounting team. So that our goal is not just go ahead and say, oh yeah, we serve deaf community. The idea is to integrate ourselves into the deaf community, to understand what the deaf community needs and how they want to be served, and start hiring people and providing jobs to the deaf community and work with them closely.
Explain a little bit about how the services are delivered. I mean, I would imagine, based upon the interpretation projects that I've been involved with, where you send an interpreter out to a location and they do either a one-to-one or one-to-many. But I don't know how that works logistically with, deaf interpreters. I don't know how is it more and more of it being done remotely through technology, but maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
You can certainly take a look on our website, where we have the whole list of services that go under the umbrella of deaf services. In general, so it is just like you can see that it can be done on site and can be done remote. And when we talk about remote, it's VRI. It can be also done if the clients need that on the general platform, which is Zoom and Teams, because we work a lot with the federal government. And federal government has a lot of pre-scheduled meetings because they have deaf employees, and deaf employees go on regular meetings like we do, whether it's Teams and Zooms, mostly Teams, because federal government approves Teams more because it's Microsoft for obvious reasons. So we assign our people, our interpreters, to work if it is full day, half day, or 4 hours, 3 hours through the approved platforms. But then, of course, when it's on demand, if it's a spoken language, we already know that on demand OPI is set up. That the majority of your listeners probably know how OPI works. When it's deaf community, VRI might be an option, but there are a lot of, not a lot, but at least two that I can think of, solutions that the government is provided by the government and paid by the federal government, options that the community can be using.
Okay, and do companies will they? Imagine that I'm you say that a lot of people are aware of this. I would argue that you come from that sector. You're delivering the services, so it seems very common sense to you, or it seems very ordinary or common for you. But I think there's a lot of people that aren't involved, me myself included. I've been in the language industry, but I've seen very few, service providers in action. So it's interesting for me. So I sat into a meeting where it was a conference call, and I was communicating with an executive who was deaf, and he had a sign language interpreter, and the sign language interpreter would sign everything to the executive, who would sign back to him, and then the interpreter would respond to me in English. Is that a kind of a common service these days as well?
Yes, and I'm not sure, I wouldn't know which platform at that point you and the executive you were communicating to were using, or what the choice of the platform the executive were using. So I can't speak for that particular solution. And again, I also want to make it very clear that what we are working, we are not a part of any of the solutions that federal government is providing. We are on the private side, and we work with the some private clients that we have contracts, or federal government clients that have a separate accounts for VRI or on-site.
Okay. And do those platforms allow, for example, if I'm assuming they can just go to the platform and book an interpreter in advance, and they can either have somebody come on site or they can do the VRI?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any new technology in that space to either, one, help with the delivery of the services, or help the participants kind of to facilitate the communication, whether that's captions or anything like that?
Yeah, and there are quite a few, and quite frankly, I was talking to, and I probably would just say that I don't think I would be the right person to give you the latest updates on the platform. I know that we just issued our podcast where I was interviewing Dante and Steven, and they were sharing some of the latest solutions that Dante is using, and he's deaf and he works on our team. So he usually shares with us, there is this new app that came out, and he communicates with us through those apps when we go out, because when we would go out for pizza or drinks and he visits DC, he lives in Orlando himself, and we usually would have an interpreter, and interpreter would arrive for XYZ amount of time, and then interpreter would like to leave, but at Astra is a fun team. We just sometimes want to keep going, and so Dante would pull out a cell phone out of his pocket, and then he would have several apps that he would put on the table, and it would be voice recognition specifically for deaf people. That it actually very good, because I know that my accent very often is not recognized by several several software recognition softwares, but this one is good. So it's you talk, and the software sort of like, it's almost like card captioning, but for the conversation, and it types in very big letters. So it's very easy for you to have the phone on the table and read back and forth if you communicating with somebody who is deaf. Again, it's nothing for the professional services. It's just if several friends are getting together for dinner. I always recommend to have an interpreter, but if you have a time between interpreters and you have to come up with a solution in between, there are several, and I always recommend to talk to your deaf friends and ask them what would be technology of their choice, because there are a lot.
I'm just curious, in that case, and I know that's not a professional service delivery technology, but how does the deaf person use the app to communicate to the non-deaf people, or people who don't understand ASL, for example? Does it go both ways, or is it just voice recognition to text?
So again, I would always recommend to talk to the deaf person about it, because I do not want to voice or talk for the deaf community. I don't think I have rights to do it. But there are so many of those new solutions that are coming in, because there are a lot of AI driven, there are a lot of voice recognition driven, because if I will be talking, it's going to get like almost like something that subtitles the same solution that the deaf person could be reading it. I'm pretty sure that there are some other ones. There are like lots of all this AI technology that is being trained right now, but it's just something very similar that we say with the spoken languages. It's not there, it's not perfect, but for the short conversations, you can use it, but never use it for anything that is for, medical appointments or serious long meetings. A human interpreter is what we want to set up.
Sure.
And of course, in person as recommended, because VRI is good, but it's still not there, especially if you're going on medical appointments. I know there are lots of deaf people who will say that, yes, we can use VRI for triage arrival to hospital, but for medical appointments that require, the extended conversation with doctor's appointments, they need in person interpreter.
And I can see that one challenge there would just making sure that you have interpreters in many, many different locations, or all the locations that you work with.
Yes, we do, and we keep recruiting, we keep looking, we keep screening. The point is that there is a shortage of interpreters right now, to be completely honest with you. The interpreters that are in the field after pandemic, just like many of us, we want to work from home. Not everybody wants to go in the field. Not everybody wants to get in the car and drive to multiple locations, whether those are community locations or medical facilities. So that's a problem. There is also quite a problem that, for a very long time, we had a bottleneck with the RID certifications. So right now we don't have enough RID certified interpreters. That's the truth. But now the state of Maryland requires licensure, and that will eliminate even more interpreters that will be available in the state of Maryland.
Does that affect, obviously, typically when you have high demand with low supply, it affects pricing. I'm wondering what you're seeing. Is it affecting how you charge for your services?
Well, again, I think that will definitely start affecting pricing. Again, in our case, you can't just go and change pricing, right? Because the majority of our clients are on the contract, and the majority, as you know, federal government contracts are for 5 years. Medical contracts usually sign medical contracts for 7 years.
Wow.
So, and you can't just go and say, hey, we're going to be amending the contract because interpreters are charging more. So you have to get creative. And that's the reality of our industry right now, because first we got hit by pandemic, and during the pandemic, the government and corporate entities are on a very strong budget. I'm not the only one who probably talking to you about this. Then, of course, as soon as we got out of the pandemic and started recovering, then we got hit by a war, and then a couple of other, hot zone events across the world that one way or another started affecting us. And then as soon as we started like, okay, well, we can deal with this. Let's adjust to this here and there, because that definitely affecting our supplies across the world. And then, of course, it's affecting our clients on the global level. And then here in US, because that's one way or another, it's affecting our clients' budgets. And then boom, and now, because he didn't have enough, now we will have AI revolution. And with the AI revolution, now all our clients want everything now, yesterday, and they want it cheap. So
I see. An issue is that a small pool of qualified interpreters, but an increasing or growing demand. And is this some place where technology can come in and help solve that problem?
Yes, I think it will, but it's not going to happen tomorrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, and the thing is, again, that we are talking about our challenges, right? My point is that we really have to be looking at what our clients and users need.
Mm-hmm.
Because clients and end users, in this case, are two different things. Because your client might be a hospital, but your end user is a deaf person, or your client is the hospital or the community organization, which can be a government agency, but your end user is LAP person or deaf person, and their needs can be slightly different. So this is what I sort of seen in our industry, because we keep talking about our challenges. We keep talking about how we are going to be addressing those challenges. We are talking about how we want to grow, how we want to upscale, but why we are not, we want to become millionaires and grow our businesses to 100 million and billions, but what problem we are resolving?
Yeah, I mean,
Who needs our solution? So here, and again, I can't speak for everybody. I'm talking only for my team and only for Astra. So my goal is always think at what the community really needs.
no, it's a great way to look at it, because all businesses should be focused on solving a problem, right? Solving a problem and gaining a customer. But the way you gain a customer is to solve one of their problems. But you bring up a really good point. You have a difference between the customer and the end user. How much, I mean, do most of the customers, are they really aware of the end user's real needs? Or do they just say, hey, we have to provide this service and check that box? Because I could imagine where you're like, yeah, we can provide this remotely, but the quality of the experience is not going to be the same as if we have somebody on site or in person. And, do your customers really, do they always understand the end user's needs, or is there some education involved on your team side?
Yeah, and so Mark, you are one of the best sales people that I know.
Wow.
So,
you need to meet
well,
with people. You need to get out more. but thank you.
no,
Thank you.
no. I'm very aware that you brought so much expertise to our team. So I know that, in my opinion, you can. Well, that's how I look at it. You can put your clients into, in my opinion, three categories. Maybe somebody will identify more than three categories. There are some clients who really who might not be aware of what we do here at all as an industry, right? And so they come 100% fresh, and you just talk to them and you can explain to them so many different things. And there are some clients that are already familiar with what we do here, right? And they're quite familiar with the language access, and some of them even have their own solutions and platform, and you just work with them because you collaborate with them. And there are clients who are 100% know what they want, and they just tell you, give me this for this price or I'll go elsewhere. So basically 100% fresh, halfway educated, and some of them just come to you and they say, XYZ, give me this is the price, no negotiation here, right?
Wow.
And so the way that I look at this is that, again, for at Astra, we always position ourselves as a source of information. So I think that it's like, in today's world, is really not about sales. It's really working with your customer more like consulting them, really talking to them, providing them with all the options, providing them with all the information, and then letting them to decide.
No, that's really important. I just think that sometimes customers don't know. And I many times, like, for example, if you're working with the procurement team, their job is to buy a service or a product. but they're not the end user, and so sometimes they don't maybe appreciate some of the qualitative aspects of the solution, and so that can be challenging. But if you can have those kind of conversations with them, it can be helpful. Let me ask you, because I know that you. Go ahead.
And that's the reason why I'm thinking that our goal is to always have the conversation and provide all the information which is possible, mm-hmm. and give as many options as possible and talk about different outcomes. But then they will have to decide, because again, they might have something that we didn't like. They might have challenges that we might not be aware of, and they might have budget constraints.
Absolutely.
That we might not be aware of. And again, there are different types of customers, because government have their own way of doing things, very different to corporate, and medical have their own story, because their budget come from different types of, I wouldn't say revenue, but different types of sources, financial sources.
Mm-hmm. Do you face similar challenges providing interpretation services in terms of the small supply of qualified interpreters, or is that a different marketplace and a different dynamic?
Can you clarify your question?
So we were just talking about deaf services or interpretation services for the deaf community. But what about more traditional interpretation, voice interpretation services? Do you face similar challenges in terms of the supply of qualified interpreters, or is the marketplace different for those type of interpretation services?
Spoken language?
Yes.
Yeah, and there are different ways to, and I'm sure that different companies find different ways to work on this. We position ourselves slightly different, because we do work with the seasoned interpreters, and we work with the seasoned interpreters for different types of assignment. We also planes. I live next to the White House, so
hey, Air Force One is up there circling around.
Yeah, we also really take pride in working with different communities, where we go and we communicate with different groups, and we provide training to those communities, not necessarily to individuals, but actually communities of people and organizations, when we can provide certain trainings for free or in exchange, or they invite us and for different projects where we train. We look at people that come to US for whatever reasons that they end up here. Some of them are extremely smart people. They're PhD, they're lawyers, they're doctors, teachers in their home countries. Then they end up here, and some of the very incredible stories, life stories that we hear from them, and it's very difficult for them to find their profession here, because there are lots of different constraints that they cannot start a life here. So, and that's how they end up in the programs that we provide. The programs are free of charge, and then once they finish those programs, they end up in working in either legal field or medical field or community field. And this is something that is a part of what we do, because we are very community and very mission-driven organization. The way that we look at it is that we are for profit, and financial statements are indeed important to us for whatever reasons they are, but we also prefer to run the organization as a non-profit for the reasons that I can talk on a separate podcast.
Yeah, I would love to understand that, because I've never heard that before. And we don't have to do a whole separate podcast.
We are very community and very mission-driven organization.
That's awesome. And I'm going to ask you about one last service that you provide, because I looked at your website, and again, I'm picking out services that I'm not really familiar with. Okay, because again, I came from the kind of more traditional LSP side. You have a service grouping called Inclusivity and Compliance. How does that work? How do you do that? Is it like a consulting project or what?
Yeah, those are something very new. And again, as we were talking about moving forward, and because the industry is evolving, and we are all thinking what's next and how we are going positioning ourselves and where we are going to bring new value to our communities and our customers. This is something that we were asked by our community and by our clients. We did our very new and our first project that was provided to the state of Maryland. So far, it was very successful. So stay tuned. This is something that we are to develop and move forward. And
so were you?
It's very.
Were you auditing their linguistic assets, for example, going through it and making sure everything was inclusive, or was it? I mean, what can you tell us about it without telling us too much?
I don't, I don't want to give you any wrong information because I put together, because again, this is something we haven't done before. And we were very worried that we will come up with something of a bad quality. So what I did is I put together a task force, and task force was kind of like consisted of a group of people that, well, first of all, was very passionate about doing that, and second, had knowledge. And then we put together resources. We did not care whether we are going to make money or not. We put together a budget that, and we decided, okay, it's not about making money. It's about making sure that a client gets what the client needs to get. And then took time, did research, we put together a backup plan, then we realized that, okay, if we cannot deliver it with our resources, with our historical data that we have within Astra, because we did have to use historical data that we accumulated over years of working with this particular client and other clients. Again, this is developing something that we have never done before. But the plan B was that we identified our strategic partners that we could deep into their expertise. We were able to deliver it with our internal knowledge and our internal resources. The client was happy. We did receive very positive feedback, and I know that they probably will be getting requests for additional services in that area. I don't want to go and talk more about it because it's still in the development stages. And I know that the team that worked on it, the task force that worked on it, they would be able to describe it so much better. And in general, we are, because I know that one of the things you told me that you will be asking me is what other areas we are going to be growing. So there are a few, because again, the industry is changing. And I know lots of companies, and I heard that 25% of LSPs right now are starting to provide content creation services, which is very interesting in my opinion. And I think that's how the pricing models will be changing. So it looks like everybody is innovating right now. And that's why I'm thinking there is a lot of positive things that are will be coming up soon from AI integration.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is, everybody's talking about AI, but there's no real conclusive kind of direction in terms of how it's going to be used and what the ultimate effects are going to be on our industry. I'm also hearing you say that, for some of your core services, for, deaf services, spoken interpretation services, the technology is nice and it helps with certain engagements, but there's no real substitute yet for that in-person interpreter, that in-person on-site experience. So AI might be nice, maybe help with some of the behind the scenes, the booking, maybe the training, the recruiting, I don't know, but it's not going to replace the actual language service provider, the person who goes on site and provides those interpretation services. And I'm also hearing you say that a lot of language service providers are starting to look at services that aren't so maybe commoditized as traditional translation. For example, inclusivity in compliance, which it sounds like you've got a really interesting project going on, but you're also talking about other LSPs, or you said 25% of the industry is starting to offer content creation services, and content can be created in all languages. So I think that's a tremendous opportunity. Let me ask you just a couple more questions. Where do you go to learn? Obviously, you went to Local World and you go to events like that, but what do you do on your own to kind of keep an understanding of where the industry is going, but also where your customers' businesses are going? How do you stay up on that?
Yes, so I do want to clarify that in person is important. VRI, OPI is a great opportunity. So don't get me wrong. Even so, I'm saying that for deaf community, in person interpretation is the best solution for deaf community. For spoken language as well, but spoken language can utilize OPI more. Mm-hmm. It's just VRI for deaf community is slightly different because ASL is a slightly different concept of language. Mm-hmm. So I want to make a remark here. Now, where do I go to get knowledge? As you know, I do go to the industry events, maybe not to every single one. So I'm very precise where I go and how I learn things. I still network, but I can network with the people such as you. I can network with the people in my area. I'm a big fan of connecting with Bill Rivers, who always will give the latest on compliance and development on Capitol Hill. I love all the latest podcasts. I know that after pandemic, there are so many interesting podcasts that are coming out. So big fan of all of those. And again, my point is always to understand what problems we are resolving. I always want to make sure that if we are business and people is business, and each business is here for a reason. So let's identify the problem. Let's make sure how this problem is relevant to the community that we are working for. So, and then after that, let's go and talk to those communities, whether those are business communities, whether those are the communities of end users that are using those businesses. Let's go and talk to them. Let's hear from them what they want us to deliver to them. And then let's go back. Well, that I'm talking about myself again. I can't speak for the whole industry, but I can speak for Astra. And so then I can go back and get together with my team, and then we can sit down and say, hey, I just talked to XYZ business. I talked to XYZ vertical in business, or we went to their event. I go a lot to my clients' events because I want to talk to my clients and see what challenges they are having. And I like talking about their challenges and then talking to my teams and see how we can address their challenges.
I think that it makes a lot of sense all the way around. And at the core of what you're saying is really get to know your customer and your audience, your market. That's makes a ton of sense. Hey, last question. I know that you recently started a podcast, and I watched I think it was the first episode, very high quality production. Tell us a little bit about that experience, why you're doing it, and what's going to be next.
The next one is coming out tomorrow, and we will continue improving it. We'll continue learning and making it better. It's a journey. Life is always about journey, not a destination. The reason why we came up with this podcast is, again, it's not about industry. It's not about language industry in general or any of the services, and it's not about Astra either. Those podcasts wasn't created to sell anything that we do. That podcast was created to give a voice to some of the challenges of our communities that we work with. And that podcast was created to talk to some of the leaders of the communities that we work with and talk about the positive impact that they are bringing to those communities. So again, communities, their challenges, the leaders of those communities, and all the positive impact that we all collectively can bring to those communities. So if any of you guys know anybody who is interesting person who brought something positive to any community across the world, please let us know. We would like to hear from them.
No, I think that's great. I learned from listening to your podcast. I don't have a lot of experience or exposure to the deaf community, and just some of the perceptions are so different. One, how they think of their community versus how non-deaf people maybe would think of the community or even think that there is a community. But then there were issues in terms of parents wanting them to learn to either read lips or to get implants, so and some people in the community not wanting to do that, not because they want to kind of embrace their deafness and embrace their sign language and that aspects of it. And it's a perspective that I really wasn't aware of. So thank you for doing that. I think that's it's a great approach, a great program, because for people like me who don't have experience, and that's, I would say, the majority of the people out there, it just kind of opens up a window into that world, and it kind of facilitates that greater understanding. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for giving me a platform to talk about it. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, hey, Elena, it's always good to talk to you. And last thank you for coming on memoQ Talks. And I hope to see you at one of the industry events coming up. The next local, it's going to be in Monterey. It's a beautiful place.
That's what I heard, yes. And I love California. So hopefully I will see you guys there. And I will see you, Mark, there. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining memoQ Talks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on memoQ Talks.